In this video, we're going to cover 5 things. First, if you are a person thinking about buying or selling a home in Plymouth, Michigan, why it's so critical to understand real estate agency laws in Michigan. Second, when a real estate agent is required to disclose their agency affiliation. Third, the specific duties a real estate agent in Michigan has to clients with whom they have established a real estate agency relationship. 4, the specific services a real estate agent is required to provide to clients with whom they have established an agency relationship. And finally, and fifth, the different types of real estate agency that exist within Michigan. That said, let's dive into it. So, why is it so critical to understand real estate agency law in Michigan? And that actually leads directly to the second point, which is, when is a real estate agent required to disclose their agency affiliation? We're looking here at something called the Occupational Code, which is the law in the state of Michigan that covers this topic. And you can see what I've highlighted here. The very first point in this entire topic within the law says a real estate licensee is supposed to disclose their agency affiliation before the disclosure of any confidential information. That's why it's so important to understand this in general, because if you don't know who you're talking with, for example, if you were to stumble into an open house, odds are very, very good that that agent is going to be working as a seller's agent. What that means is they are required by law to disclose to their clients anything you might say as a potential buyer that could jeopardize your confidentiality or your position if you were actually interested in the home. So that's why every single time you deal with a real estate agent, if they don't bring it to your attention first, then you need to ask. Always be sure to find out who you're speaking with in terms of what their agency affiliation is. Next, we're going to take a quick look at the specific duties a real estate licensee has to a person with whom they have an agency affiliation. So you can see I've highlighted this, and what we're looking at is the document that you will sign whenever you enter into an agency relationship with a real estate professional in the state of Michigan. It's called Disclosure Regarding Real Estate Agency Relationships. In this first section, you see item 1 reads, an agent providing services under any service provision agreement owes at a minimum the following duties to the client. I don't want to talk about each of these in detail, but let's just bounce down the highlights. First, reasonable care and skill, performance of the terms of the agreement that they've signed, loyalty to the client, that's key, compliance with laws, rules, and regulations. The next item says a real estate licensee will refer their client to other licensed professionals for expert advice when needed. In other words, real estate licensees can't act like their attorneys or tax advisors or appraisers, etc. So they have a duty to refer other people when necessary. The next item is just to provide an accounting, which is obvious. And then finally, confidentiality, which goes hand in hand with the point above about loyalty. So again, there's these fiduciary duties that come with these relationships. The next thing to cover are the specific services to be provided by a licensee when there is an agency affiliation established. So I don't want to go through these in detail because they're kind of obvious, so you can just read them quickly here. The highlights are really what you need to understand, but it's the stuff you would expect: marketing, helping with offers, assisting on the completion of the transaction, providing a detailed closing statement. Next, let's talk about the specific types of agency that exist within the state of Michigan. Again, if we look at the highlights quickly on this form, we see that a seller's agent under a listing agreement with the seller acts solely on behalf of the seller. Obviously, the name is fairly straightforward. Same deal with the buyer's agent. A buyer's agent under a buyer's agency agreement with the buyer acts solely on behalf of the buyer. Then we have something called a dual agent. And a dual agent is supposed to be the agent of both the seller and the buyer, but only with the knowledge and informed consent in writing of both the seller and the buyer. In a dual agent situation, the licensee will not be able to disclose all known information to either the buyer or the seller, and they won't be able to provide the full range of fiduciary duties to either as well. And then the final category we have is something called a transaction coordinator. The licensee in that scenario is not acting as an agent of either the seller or the buyer, but is providing some level of service to complete a transaction. Those are the different kinds of agency relationships that exist in Michigan. And again, the key thing to end the video with is this idea that you always need to know who you're talking with in terms of a real estate licensee, whether it's an agent or a broker. you need to know where their agency affiliation and their agency allegiance lies. Something said to the wrong person could cost you real money.
And when it comes to agency representation, it is our strong recommendation that you always have exclusive representation. Meaning, if you're a buyer, you should be represented by a buyer's agent. And if you're a seller, you should be represented by a seller's agent. We don't think it's possible for an agent to serve two masters properly, which is why we never advocate dual agency. In the situations where you would want someone to serve as a transaction coordinator are few and far between. So it almost always defaults back to either a buyer representation or seller representation, depending upon your particular needs.
Again, this was intended to be a very quick overview of real estate agency law in the state of Michigan. This is specific to Michigan. Different states have different laws. Many states have laws that are similar to Michigan, but I want to be clear, we're just talking about Michigan here. So if you have any questions about this or anything else for that matter, please don't ever hesitate to reach out and ask for help. We're always glad to provide help, absolutely no cost. If you have any questions about this or anything else, please check out the contact slide at the end of this video and reach out. We'll be glad to help you. Thanks and have a great day.